In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So, happy Feast of the Resurrection. We've had, it was 2 weeks ago that we had our last Bible study, so I'm sure everyone remembers what we were talking about, right? I think all of you were here then, right? Yeah. What were we talking about?
I was reading Acts 21, chapter 21. It seemed like it was a turning point here because the first few verses, everybody warned Paul of going to Jerusalem. He's going to be killed there. And he told him, I don't care. I can go there. Verse 13. What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready, not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. Then actually when he went to Jerusalem, you go to verse 17, and then we had come to Jerusalem, apparently Paul and some of the disciples or fellows. The brethren receive us gladly. So 17 and 18, 19 show that they really welcome him. They really welcome him in the beginning.
So it says the people that welcomed him are not the Jews, but they are the Christians that welcomed him.
Yeah,
so
brethren.
The brethren are like the other Christians. So see, it says in verse 18, on the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and the other elders were present. This is James the apostle, okay, and the other elders from the church. So the threat in Jerusalem.
They're not Jews.
Yeah. So these people that accepted them warmly were the Christians, but it was the Jews later that was going to be the ones who.
Yeah, and really, I don't think there's a problem with the Jews. I was reading this and reading. Now, when 7 days were almost, that's verse 27, almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowds and laid hands on him. And things go downhill from there. From there, the rest all will get to persecution for Paul. This is the beginning here. Now, this is Jews from Asia, so they're not locals. They were coming here for some reason.
So the Jews.
They don't know what Asia is because Jerusalem is in Asia. Damascus is in Asia.
No, they don't consider Jerusalem to be in Asia. Asia is like, the places like Phrygia and Galatia and all these places that he went and he preached.
Okay.
So the Jews that were there were the ones that saw him preaching, the ones that were against him, the ones that tried to stone him. They'd always chased after him and so on.
But they were not locals from Jerusalem. So
the locals from Jerusalem, of course, knew who he was, but the Jews in Asia had a direct eyewitness account of all the things he was doing while he was preaching. So now that they're back, they're telling the Jews that were there, oh, by the way, look, Paul was doing this, and this. So they stirred up the crowd based on the things that they had seen him do recently, within the last, year or more.
What they were doing is not locals.
They went. I mean, it could be that the people were living in Jerusalem but traveling over there, or it could be that they lived in Asia and were traveling to Jerusalem. We don't know.
So the first one, because since from this point on, it was not persecution before all the end.
Yeah. So where we had left off at, we read the first part of Acts chapter 23, which is where St. Paul begins his sermon, his defense to the people. After these things that Anthony's saying about how the Jews stirred up trouble, they accused St. Paul of bringing a Gentile into the temple, which he did not do, but because they saw him associating with Trophimus, who was a convert, Gentile convert to Christianity, they saw him associating with him, and so they assumed that he must have brought him into the temple, but they did not see him with him. And so it began this big stir, this mob to happen, and they were coming to attack St. Paul. And then this is when the commander of the Roman army that was garrisoned there at the temple, they took him, so, they kind of arrested him because they felt like he must have done something wrong, and at the same time to protect him from the mob of people that were coming to attack him. And he now requests that he speak to the people, Then after this, they again are not, they're divided. Some of them are Pharisees, some of them are Sadducees. They're divided. And then again they take him to the Sanhedrin council. The next day.
Another thing we took against him that he's creating what he called a sect of the Nazarene, that was mentioned here.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean Christian. So we don't call him Christian because he was not known as Christian.
Yeah,
It was a
Christianity.
sect at that time.
Yes, it was called a sect. It was called a sect. Or
Yeah,
they called it. They called it
Nazarene, I'm not
the.
sure what Nazarene means.
It's because he's from Nazareth. Okay, so it's like his. They consider him to be like like his sect. Okay, so here in Acts chapter 23, we see where St. Paul is standing before the council, the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin council, okay, which is made up of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, okay, and he's giving now another account, another kind of defense for himself here. So we had already gone through the first few verses of this, but we'll go through it again, and then we'll continue the rest of the chapter, Acts 23. Okay, so it says, then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? And those who stood by said, Do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and the resurrection of the dead I am being judged. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. We had talked about this last time. Why was the assembly divided at this? The other way around. The Sadducees. Sorry, no, you're right. Pharisees believed in resurrection. Did not. Okay, did not.
The Sadducees supposed to be a wealthier group over there.
The Sadducees are wealthier. They're the priestly class, is the Sadducees. Okay, the Pharisees were not the priestly class. The Pharisees were like representatives of the people. Okay, but they were very much about the oral tradition of the law, where all these laws that had been passed down over the generation after generation, things that were not recorded in the laws of Moses. So they had invented essentially all of these new regulations and laws that were not required, that were not written down in the Torah. And so they were always pushing people to do all of these ceremonial ritual things. The Sadducees did not do this. The Sadducees only believed what was written and not the oral tradition. They are, yes, they are educated, yes. Verse 8, For Sadducees say there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Okay. Now, so what St. Paul had cleverly done is he divided the council, because he claimed and he said that the reason why he's being judged is because of the resurrection of the dead. He knew that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead, but the Pharisees did. Okay, so now you see the response in verse 9. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. So essentially, the Sanhedrin is unable to make any kind of consensus judgment against St. Paul, and so the commander takes him away from them and brings him back into the barracks for his own safety. Okay. But the following night, the Lord stood by him and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so now you must also bear witness at Rome. So God is continually encouraging him and giving him warnings and telling him what is it that he should expect, so that when these things begin to happen to him, he does not feel like he is in this on his own, but that he is comforted and supported by God, and God who is allowing all these things to happen. St. Paul's purpose was to preach the word of God regardless of where he was. And we'll see that's the one thing in common about everywhere that he went. Whether he was in Asia or Europe or Greece or Jerusalem or Rome or wherever he was, he always preached the word of God, and he always preached in the manner that was needed by the people he was with. He spoke to them in a manner that they needed. Even here, when we see him with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he very cleverly found something to find some common ground with them. These are the Pharisees. These are Pharisees that crucified Christ. Okay? And yet, he's finding a means by which to find some common ground, saying that he believes in the resurrection. Okay, and the Pharisees agree with that. They also believe in the resurrection. And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. The way these oaths worked in the Jewish culture is they started out by saying, like, let it be so to me if you remember, if sometimes when you read in the Old Testament, it says, let it be to me. So, or it's like saying, may I be cursed if, and then whatever the oath is. So essentially saying, if I do not perform the oath, then let God curse me. Let there be some kind of consequence and punishment on me. So these people that were so, focused on the idea that they must kill him, they see him as a threat, and they must kill him. So they said that we will not either eat nor drink. This is how serious they were. We will not either eat nor drink until they kill him. So they're very serious. Of course, they're going to try to do this as fast as possible. Now we know in the end this failed. They did not end up killing him. Jewish law also had a way to be released from such an oath when something unexpected had happened. So essentially what they were saying is, we have every intention to attempt to kill him. But what we end up seeing happening is that the commander orders that he be taken from there secretly at night. And so those people that are coming to kill him, obviously they can't kill him because he's not there anymore. So in this case, the Jewish law provides for essentially saying that the curse or the oath be released because they made an attempt, but it failed. So it's not like they didn't try. Okay.
But Paul never had to struggle with Gentiles. All the Jews. I guess it could be a reason that the chief priests, they were worried about their positions. They found that the Paul didn't have effect on them or something.
Well, sure. I mean, Paul is not just overthrowing the religious kind of framework that they have, but even the political framework, because the Jews, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, are like seen by the Romans as like the leaders of the people. And so as long as they are identified as the leaders of the people, they have power and authority. But if St. Paul comes and he establishes a new leadership, then it undermines the leadership of the Sanhedrin Council. So it's not only, this is why there's more to it than simply, okay, what is the truth? The Pharisees and Sadducees are not so interested in the truth. There were Pharisees interested in the truth, like someone like Nicodemus, someone like Joseph of Arimathea. These were Pharisees, and they were interested in the truth, and that's why they listened to the words of Christ. They believed in him. Okay, but people like this, they're not interested in the truth at all. They have some ulterior motive for why is it that they're doing what it is that they're doing. Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him, but we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Okay, so what did they do? Right, so it's a conspiracy, right? So they said what? They said they went to the chief priests and the elders, these people, these 40 men, okay, and they said, pretend as though you want to bring him for questioning. And while they are bringing him for questioning, we're going to kill him. Okay? Right. So who are these chief priests and elders? It's mostly the Sadducees. Okay, because remember, when he stood before the council, the Pharisees defended him. Okay, the Pharisees said, what if he has seen an angel or a spirit or something? They believed in the resurrection of the dead. So it was not the Pharisees that are going to be the ones at this point trying to kill him. It was the Sadducees. And again, the Sadducees are the chief priests. Okay, so the priestly class is the Sadducees, and here these are the people that are now trying to kill him. Okay.
At the same time, he told the Pharisees, "I'm like you."
Right.
My father and my family first.
Exactly.
So we get the support.
Yeah. So, verse 16. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. This is the first time we hear about that Paul has a sister or that she has a son. So essentially, this is his nephew, okay, who is coming and heard about this, and he went into the barracks to tell Paul. We don't even know how he found out about it or any of the details of this, and we never hear about them again. This is the last time. So that's a good question. So because Paul was a Roman citizen, Roman prisoners were given a lot of freedom to receive guests, to receive visitors. So he didn't like sneak in. He went to them and said, I want to speak with Paul, and they allowed him in. Okay? Then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. Okay, so here's a trivia question. He said, call one of the centurions and take him to the commander. So who is the centurions and who is the commander? How many soldiers does a centurion lead? 100, like the word sent, okay, which means 100. How many does the commander lead? Okay, yeah, it was larger number. Do you remember what? We talked about it last time. 1,000. 1,000. Yeah, okay, it's 1,000. So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, Paul the prisoner called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, what is it that you have to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now they are ready waiting for the promise from you. So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, tell no one that you have revealed these things to me. Now it's kind of amazing also that the commander believes him. You know, this young boy who's coming, I mean, we don't know how young he was, but he's a youth. He's coming and he's saying these things. He's offering no proof that this is actually the case, and yet the commander is believing him. You can see like the hand of God working here to free St. Paul from the situation. And he called for the 2 centurions, saying, prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. Okay, now, this number of soldiers, can you imagine? 200 soldiers, 200 spearmen, 70 horsemen. Okay, this was nearly half of all the Roman soldiers in Jerusalem. Okay, almost half of all the soldiers that were in Jerusalem were going to go to protect this man. Okay, Paul, so they could transfer him to the governor. Okay.
But the chief priests agreed with this 40 people who have an oath to kill him. Please go ahead and kill him.
Yeah, it says back here in verse. No, I mean they just care about what they want. So in verse 14, when it says they came to the chief priests and elders and said, we have bound ourselves, okay, and then they agreed. Yeah. Okay, so now the commander, whose name is Claudius Lysias, okay, he's going to write a letter to Felix, who is the governor. Okay, he wrote a letter in the following manner. Claudius Lysias to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. Okay, and when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. So he's saying, I didn't understand. This is exactly what happened. He didn't understand what the conflict was about. So he sent him to the Sanhedrin council so that they would question him. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. So not only is he sending St. Paul to Felix the governor, okay, to have a trial, but he's also arranging for the Jews who accused him to also go there. Okay, so he's not just kind of like whisking him away somewhere far away to hide him from them. He's saying, no, there needs to be a fair trial. Again, the Romans were a very law-oriented society and culture. He needed to have a trial because he was a Roman citizen, so there was going to be a trial, and he was going to tell the Jews who accused him to appear before Felix also as the governor, who was going to be like the judge presiding over this trial.
But Paul had no defense. He had to defend himself. Like right now, in a trial like this.
Yeah, he does not have any. He does not have any counsel. He's going to be his own defense. Yeah, and it's possible that he could have had the right to that, but he does not in practice. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. Okay, Antipatris is a military station that was built by Herod the Great and named after his father. So King Herod the Great's father was Antipater, Okay, so this fortress that Herod the Great had made, it's called Antipatris. So it was kind of like a way station between where they were and to the location of where Felix is, the governor in Caesarea. Okay. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and return to the barracks. Okay. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. So once they got to this station, this military station, okay, it says in verse 32, they left the horsemen to go on with him and they returned to the barracks. So it was like the large group of soldiers traveling together. Some of them were horsemen and some of them were foot soldiers. They all traveled together. Then they got to this way station, this military station. The foot soldiers returned to Jerusalem, and then the horsemen continued with him. And St. Paul himself was on a horse, because it says they prepared a mount for him. So he was also riding on a horse.
But Felix, the governor, is not in that military station.
No, somewhere. He's in Caesarea. So they're traveling further on to get to Caesarea. Okay? So I wanted to share a little bit of information about Felix the governor. Okay, some background, some historical information about him, which would kind of give us some insight into some of the things that we're going to read about him that he's done and says. Okay, so he was the governor of Judea from 52 to 59 AD. Okay, another word for governor is procurator. Okay, procurator is another way of saying the governor. He's essentially the governor who is responsible for Judea in the eyes of the emperor. So the emperor divides up the kingdom into provinces, okay? And this procurator, governor, Felix, is the one who has been assigned by the emperor to be responsible for Judea. We also know at this time that Judea and Cilicia, even though they're pretty big areas, but they were considered to be both under this region of under this Governor Felix. And this is important. Why? Because St. Paul is from Tarsus, and Tarsus is in Cilicia. Okay? So St. Paul, being from Cilicia, falls under the jurisdiction of Felix the governor. We'll see later on that the very first question that the governor asks St. Paul is, where are you from? In order to determine whether he has jurisdiction of this or not. So even though he's the procurator or governor of Judea, this also applies to Cilicia. Okay, which is where Tarsus is. Yes, he's a Roman citizen, so he's treated as a Roman. Yes, okay. Felix was made governor because of his brother. His brother had considerable influence in the court of Emperor Claudius Caesar. So his brother, having close connections with the emperor and with the court of the emperor, was able to kind of pull strings and make his brother to be the governor of Judea. Okay, so that tells you something about Felix. He didn't get there because he's a great performer or because he's very wise, or he got there because of, in Arabic we call it kosa, okay, which means like somebody pulled strings for you. Okay. Also, something very interesting is that both of these brothers were former slaves that were slaves of the imperial family that were later freed. Okay, so the only way that people knew about them was because they happened to be in the imperial court as slaves. Okay, and it was very, very rare for, almost unheard of for someone who was a slave to end up becoming a governor. Okay, in Rome, in the Roman Empire. Okay, so you can tell because he was a slave and because he wasn't assigned this post because of his character, he was not a very fit governor. Okay, he did not do a good job. And actually, even when it comes to like other things that happened to him as governor that are maybe not recorded in the Bible, it was probably the time of least peace in Judea during his tenure as governor. There were many insurrections and rebellions, and he was very brutal in trying to quell these rebellions. He wasn't very tactful in any way. He didn't know how to negotiate. He just kind of used brute force to kill his enemies. And because one thing that Romans were very big on was the idea of maintaining the peace. So they wanted to maintain the peace. And he felt that unless he maintained the peace in his province, then it's going to look bad that he's not able to do that in his region. So, but instead of maintaining the peace using some kind of wisdom, he maintained the peace through brutal force. Okay, so he was very hated. People did not like him. okay, because of this. Another interesting thing about him is that he had 3 different wives, okay, at 3 different times, and all of them were princesses, okay. The first wife of his was the granddaughter of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So you know the story of Cleopatra, the Egyptian queen who married Mark Antony, okay, Roman. So their granddaughter was his first wife. His third wife, this is going to be mentioned a little further down, her name was Drusilla, and she is the daughter of King Agrippa I. King Agrippa I is the same as Herod, the one who killed James the Apostle. If you remember back, I don't remember which chapter it was, in the book of Acts where we read about Herod killing James the Apostle, the brother of John. Okay? That Herod, remember there's many different Herods. Okay? That Herod is the one whose daughter is Drusilla, who is married to Felix the governor. Okay? Also, at the end of his reign in the year 59 AD, he was removed from office because of mismanagement. So again, it became clear like he didn't know what he was doing, didn't do a good job, he was removed.
All these people, including the emperor, all these people answer to the Roman Empire in Rome, right? Roman Empire controlled this area.
Yes.
So the bosses are in Rome.
The emperor. Yeah, the emperor is the boss. The emperor is the ruler of the whole empire. Is in Rome. Yeah.
Okay, so when you say emperor, this is like Rome.
Yeah.
This is the biggest empire in the world at that time.
Yeah. Okay, so all of that is kind of background information about Felix. So here, now Felix, if we go back to verse 33, when they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, okay, so remember, that's why he asked. That's why it says, and when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers have also have come, and he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Okay. Herod's praetorium was like a palace that was built by Herod the Great. Okay, so that's, yeah, but under, like, as a prisoner, as a prisoner. So why were they waiting? They're waiting now because what? I will hear you when your accusers also have come. So the Jews who now have realized that they took Paul secretly at night, and the commander is telling them now go and appear for this trial, they're waiting for them to come. Okay.
And you want to get both sides.
Yeah. Acts 24. And now after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. Okay, who is Tertullus? He is the lawyer. Okay, so they call him an orator because he's eloquent in speech. He's essentially the lawyer of the Sanhedrin, of the high priest. Okay, so the high priest got this lawyer so he can present the case in front of Felix the governor.
So exactly the prosecutor.
Yeah, he's the prosecutor. Yeah. But the high priest himself is also there, and other members of the Sanhedrin are there. So it wasn't just Tertullus by himself. And when he was called upon, so again, this is now like we're watching a trial. This is like a court case happening now. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, he's speaking now to Felix, seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. This was a common part of the beginning of a trial where essentially the lawyer flatters the judge. Okay, this was actually like an expected thing to be said. Now, maybe not the details of what's said, but but the expectation is there's some kind of introduction where the lawyer praises the judge, the governor, in some way. In this case, the flattery that was given is outrageous because it's the exact opposite. Okay, like I said, this is the time where there was the least peace ever in Jerusalem, and here he's saying, what? Through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight. Okay, so it's the exact opposite of what's actually happening. Okay. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried, so yeah, the sect of the Nazarenes, it refers to Christians, okay? He even tried to profane the temple, okay, and we seized him. What is the accusation that he profaned the temple? What is that? That's the accusation. Yeah, that he was profaning the temple by bringing a Gentile into the temple, which never happened. Okay. Yeah, and they have no evidence. Yeah. And we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. Okay, now you have to kind of understand something here as to why he's saying this. Okay, he's saying what? He tried to profane the temple. We seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law, but the commander Lysias came by and with great violence took him out of our hands. So what is he saying? The Romans were they were not they did not assimilate the cultures of the people that they conquered. They said, okay, you province, you can still have your religion, you can still have your authorities, you can still have your local laws, you can still have these things, but there are a certain set of criteria you must follow. You must pay taxes, you must, obey Caesar, like certain things like that. And one of the reasons that they were able to maintain the peace for so long and have such a vast empire is because they didn't try to force people to convert to their religion. They didn't try to force people to, change their cultures or change their ways. Okay, so one of the things that the Romans had given to the Jews was the ability to prosecute people who violated their own law. Okay, now maybe not to put them to death, because actually when it came the time for Christ, the Pharisees says, well, we can't kill him because we're not permitted to, even though we consider him to be a blasphemer. So they went to Pontius Pilate and they said, no, we want you to crucify him. So they weren't saying here that we were wanting to kill St. Paul, but they were saying what? That we wanted to prosecute him. Okay, but what happened? Commander Lysias, the Roman commander, he's the one who came and snatched him away. So they're trying to say what? We have the right to try him. We have the right to prosecute him. We have the right to punish him. We have the right to seize him. And Lysias took him from us. Okay, so they're trying to make an appeal to the Roman law in this. This isn't just a complaint. They're rooting this argument in the Roman law. But the commander Lysias came by and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. So all the Jews that were there were like, yeah, that's right. Okay, which obviously they would say. Okay, so if you look at the details of what Tertullus is accusing St. Paul of, there's three main accusations. Okay, the first is that he's a creator of dissension in verse 5. We have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world. Okay, that's the first. This is related to like stirring up riots. They said, okay, you know what? These Jews from Asia came and they said everywhere he goes, there's riots and there's problems and so on. So that's where they're escalating this and they're saying it's all over the world. It's not even just here locally in Jerusalem. This man is a plague in the entire world. And everywhere that he goes, everywhere around the empire, he's causing problems. He's a troublemaker. Okay? So that's his first accusation.
And as you mentioned before, the Romans have interest in keeping the area peaceful and quiet. So they don't really care if all is good or bad, but they care about things. They don't no rights, no property.
Right. Exactly. Like they don't care about all the religious stuff that he's talking about. All they care about is that there's peace. And so anytime that there's something that someone who's causing a problem, then he becomes on their radar screen. Okay? The other thing you have to understand too is because the Romans want peace, they want the Jews to be happy. Because if the Jews aren't happy and they cause insurrections and rebellions and all this stuff, then that's against the philosophy of the Romans. So they're not really out for pure justice here. They're out for what is in their own interest, which is to keep the peace. So if the high priests and the Sanhedrin and all these Jewish authorities and important people that are very influential among the Jews, if they want this man, killed, or if they want him imprisoned or whatever, and that's going to cause peace, they have an interest in agreeing with them. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. So that was the first accusation, is that he's a creator of dissension and riots and so on. The second accusation they make against him is that he is a leader of the Christians, when they say, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Okay, this is kind of an extension of the first accusation, but he's associating everything that St. Paul does with the Christians. So he's saying this is not an isolated man, this is not just one person who's doing this. This is a philosophy, this is a way, this is a religion, this is a whole group of people that have the same belief as St. Paul, and unless we do something to stop this movement, then you're going to see these problems happen more and more and more and more. Okay. The third accusation was that he violated the temple. Okay, he violated the temple. And this is specifically where the Romans had given the Jews authority to enforce the laws, forbidding Gentiles from desecrating the temple. So if the Jews saw that someone was going to, a Gentile was going to the temple, they could deal with it themselves. So because they accused St. Paul of this, accused St. Paul of bringing a Gentile into the temple, then this became kind of under their jurisdiction. And this is why they're complaining and say, why did you take him away from us? Okay. So, and then at the end here, they said, they essentially say to Felix in verse 8, by examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. So it's going to be self-evident to you when you speak with him that all the things that we say are true. Okay. Then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. What is St. Paul doing? No, but he hasn't defended himself yet. What is the statement?
He's talking to Felix.
Yeah, he's talking to Felix. What is he saying to him?
A judge of this nation. But Felix is not a judge, he's just a governor.
But he's judging this, he's a judge, because he's judging this case now. So remember what we said at the beginning of the trial? You open up with flattery. So here St. Paul is not flattering him, but he's making a statement of fact that's really not that flattering, but he's just saying, we know that you have been the governor for many years, so I will speak, essentially. But it was kind of the equivalent of what Tertullus had done, in the sense that you begin the case by some comment about the judge, some comment about the governor. Okay.
Now we say honor.
Yeah. I mean, we give honor to the judges. Yeah. I do the more cheerfully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogue or in the city. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. Okay. What is the relevance of him saying, it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship? Why is he saying that? Right, he's saying, I've only been there for 12 days. How could I do all these things that you say if I've only been there for 12 days? Okay, he's saying, I have no history of inciting the Jews. I've only been there for 12 days. It's not enough time to do all the things that they're accusing him of doing. Okay, he's saying, I only went to Jerusalem to worship. That was my reason. I went to Jerusalem to worship, not to organize a rebellion or anything else. Okay, I did not go there to stir up crowds, neither in the temple, nor in the synagogue, nor anywhere in the city, which is what they claim that he's doing. And then the third thing he says about them is they have no proof. Show me your proof, in verse 13. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. Actually, even those people who were supposedly the witnesses that saw him do these things, they were not there. So there was no one to accuse him. That was an eyewitness. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself also strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Okay, so now he's responding to the accusation that he is the leader of a sect. Okay, so the first thing he responded to was all related to the first accusation, which is that he was a creator of dissension, a rebellious person causing rebellion. The first thing he said was all related to this. I did not have time to cause a rebellion. I don't have no history of causing rebellions, so on and so on. This second part of his response is regarding the second accusation, which is that he is the leader of the sect, okay, of the Christians, okay? And so that's what he's saying. This way that they call a sect, he's saying, yes, I am a Christian, okay? But what is Christianity, and what is the focus? Is it making rebellions? Is it a political movement? No. Okay, he's saying actually Christianity is the natural extension and fulfillment of Judaism. He's saying what? I worship the God of my fathers. It's not like I'm worshiping some new God. I'm not like created some brand new thing and I'm worshiping a different God. This is the God of our fathers, the same God that I worship. And essentially he's making the argument that I have everything in common with them. The only difference is that I believe that the resurrection has already taken place. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, whereas they believe the Messiah has not come. I believe that the resurrection has begun. Okay, this act of resurrection has happened. Okay, that's the only difference between me and them, is what he's saying. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me. Like a rebellion or, yeah. So here he's responding to the third charge. The third charge is that he had desecrated the temple. Okay? So essentially here what he's saying is what? First of all, he's demonstrating his reverence to God as a Jew. He's demonstrating his practice of Jewish traditions. So first he's saying, all those years that I was traveling around, I wasn't just preaching, but I was also bringing alms to bring to my own nation, okay, to help the poor here in the nation, and this is what he did, okay. And then what he had done after the end of the third missionary journey, if you remember, he took a vow, a Jewish vow, and he purified himself in the temple. He paid for and participated with the vows of 4 other people who were Jews, again demonstrating that he is participating in the Jewish life, okay. So he's saying, I am doing the Jewish practices. I am a Jewish man. Okay? I am a Pharisee. I'm doing all these things. The only point of difference is about the resurrection of the dead. And again, he's saying, if anyone who can say otherwise, can object to what I'm saying, they should be here and say, but those people are not present as witnesses. Or else, let those who are here themselves say, if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council, unless it is for the one statement which I cried out standing among them concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. Okay, so again he's saying, even those people who are here, they have nothing that they can accuse me of. There was nothing they observed in me that I did that was against the law. Okay, the only statement which he admits that is going to cause a dissension and a problem between them is related to the resurrection of the dead. That's all. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. So here the problem is, again, back to the idea of maintaining the peace. Felix knows that Paul is innocent. He knows that there is no reason to put him to death and no reason to keep him as a prisoner. But he wants to buy time because he doesn't know what to do. If he lets St. Paul go, then it's going to cause a big problem in Jerusalem. Okay, and he's already stressed out by all these problems that are already been happening, and he doesn't want to deal with it. So instead of making a judgment, he just defers the judgment and said, I'm going to wait for Lysias to come, and then I will make a judgment. Okay? We have no evidence that Lysias ever did come. We have no evidence that Felix even asked Lysias to come. Because remember, Lysias is a commander stationed in Jerusalem. Okay? Did he actually call him and tell him to come? And for what reason? We don't know. But there's no proof or evidence to show us that this actually happened, and certainly not in the Bible did it say that Lysias ever came or he was asked to come at all. Verse 24. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, remember we had mentioned Drusilla. Who is she? The daughter of Herod. Which Herod? Yes, the one who killed James, the brother of John. When Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now here, this is interesting, because now he's calling St. Paul not to question him regarding to the trial. He's wanting to ask him about his faith. He was impressed by him, okay, and he wanted to hear him about his faith. And specifically the message of the resurrection that St. Paul was preaching about. Now as he reasoned, meaning St. Paul, now as St. Paul reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgments to come, Felix was afraid and answered, "Go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call you." Okay, why was he afraid? Well, what is they speaking about specifically? He said they spoke about righteousness, self-control, judgment to come. Well, so what made him afraid? Yeah, so he's saying, essentially, if what Paul is saying is true, Paul seems like a really serious guy. He seems like he really believes in what he's talking about. He's willing to die for what he believes. And now that St. Paul is telling him all these things about you should live a certain way, you should live a self-controlled life, he's specifically addressing things that clearly Felix has problems with. Okay, so that made Felix nervous. Like he didn't consider, oh yeah, this is just a crazy man. No, he's saying, well, maybe the things he's saying is true, and so I don't want to hear it because it's just bothering me. Okay, and so.
But he's worried about the Jews.
He would. But here specifically, he's worried now for a second reason, which is he's worried for his own salvation. Okay, because again, he asked him, come and speak to me about your faith. He didn't come and say anything else. Come and speak to me about your faith. And then when St. Paul is telling him about the faith, he's getting nervous. Kind of like sometimes when people like listen to a sermon and they feel very convicted by their lifestyle and they feel like they're not comfortable. Okay, they're uncomfortable listening because they feel like it's very convicting to them. And at the same time, someone like Felix, he really didn't have much will to change those things. He remained as he was. No, he knew about Christianity because even it says in verse 22, but when Felix heard these things, having a more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings. He knew about Christianity. He understood it, at least in a basic sense. And so he's asking St. Paul to give him more information, and now he's afraid about what he hears, which means that he somewhat believes what St. Paul is saying is true. Meanwhile, okay, and this is another reason he kept him in prison. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. Okay, and this kind of corruption was very common.
Right.
Yeah, it was very common. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. Okay, so again, he was removed in 59 AD because he was incompetent. Okay, and they put this new governor, Porcius Festus, now instead of him. And it was very common in those days. Whenever a new governor would come, he would look at all the open cases, all the prisoners that are in prison that have not yet been either released or killed or whatever sentenced, and they would deal with that. They would say essentially, okay, we want to start fresh. Okay, And so Felix wasn't wanting to be the one to let him go because he wanted the Jews to like him, and Festus also didn't want to be the one to let him go because he knew that the Jews wanted him to remain. So that's where he stayed. So that was even 2 years of him being there, and now Festus is here and he's still there.
So the Felix was really corrupt as a prisoner for money to release him or something.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Glory be to God forever.